Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan. And today we're going to kind of go over some formats that you're expected to see for the official release coming up here in like about a week or two, I want to say, by the time this video gets published. It's in a very exciting time. People are starting to get their shipping notifications at the very least, if not already getting their product. Very exciting time. Have you already got your shipping notification, Dan?
My shipping notification has happened. Actually, by the time this is airing, I will have already live streamed opening a bunch of my boxes, if not all of my boxes, depending on whether or not a golden booster shows up and if we're going fast enough to, not take the entire. I don't want to take more than about 3 hours for the stream, basically. And because of the nature of Altered, live streaming opening it has to be a little weird. So I'm just not sure if that's going to add significant time or not. So, but yeah, I will have opened a bunch of product and will be enjoying that. And of course, the people in Europe and other countries have already had their product, a lot of them, for a long time. So this is just the US finally catching up and getting stuff in our hands. Jordan, how about you? Are you patiently awaiting or impatiently awaiting?
I am impatiently being patient. I got my shipping notification. It's coming in, I guess, like 5 packages. Allegedly, according to the tracking, I'm going to get one of them tomorrow. My assumption is they split up the cards and the like deck box stuff. So because I want cards first, it's going to be the deck boxes that come tomorrow just to taunt me, be like, hey, look at these empty boxes that you could have cards in if you had them.
That sounds right.
And then the rest, however, or I only have to wait one more day. So Saturday, after I get back from some local play at the card shop, I should have my cards and I could start an opening extravaganza.
Very exciting. Very pumped just to see what array of uniques I have to work with. That's, I think, obviously that's just been the most exciting thing about Altered. Everybody posting and sharing their uniques all the time. Right before we started recording this, you and I were digging through piles of uniques, looking for certain ones, and we were like, oh, look at this one. This one's so cool.
I know. I'm so excited to see what I get. I opened one box that I had purchased from the local shop that got some Kickstarter product in, and I was thinking I wouldn't, but then I got impatient and was like, no, I got to get some now, because we were having like casual play days, and they have some like loaner starter decks, but I've already had a chance to play with the starter decks for the last like year. So I was like, I want something new. So I just bought a box and built like probably not the greatest deck because it was just built off of a single box of cards, but
yeah,
it got the job done and it was so much fun. I'm so excited for the casual play day this upcoming week, and then our pre-release, if you will, the week after that.
Yeah, that's basically the schedule we've got going on right now too. So after our roadshow, we built up a good following at our group. We at our LGS, we had a group of about 10 people at our first 10 to 12 people at our first open play, just Tuesday night gaming, and so that was a lot of fun. We got to see some. It was really fun actually, just to see what decks people were exploring. Way more Rin and Orchids than I expected to see. That was like the really surprising. Like, kept looking over. Oh, it's another match. Oh, it's another Rin and Orchid. Everybody wants to play Rin and Orchid. I think that's my favorite hero by artwork. I really like the artwork on that card. And then let's see. We had shout out to our local Corgan, who was playing a really fun Subhash and Marmo deck. No, not Subhash and Marmo. Sorry. Traced and Rossum. They're playing Traced and Rossum.
Spicy.
And he also had a Basira and Kaizaimon, which he only played one game because it was such a trouncing on the opponent that he's like, maybe I should put this away and play some other decks for the night. It was really gross.
Nice.
Yeah, but that and then the one other thing I want to mention was we had a woman who came with her 2 sons. One of the sons came to our roadshow, and then he brought the game home and showed the whole family. And then the family was like, "Oh, this game's sweet." So they all came basically.
That's awesome.
And yeah, that was so cool to see. Just like we had like a really young kid from the family who was playing and picked up the game so fast. Actually, like she had said that he basically just learned it immediately, like went through the game, like, yep, I get it. And she just said it's just because it's so intuitive. It just worked that way. Um, and she was playing this really awesome Izmir. Like, I learned she's a hard control player, and it was like, yep, I'm just gonna play Akisha and Taru like full Izmir control, and had some insanely cool uniques in there too. So it was just such a blast. I'm so excited for next week when I get to join in the play with my decks.
I know it's going to be the most exciting. And fun fact, um, this you'll find this as a very funny story. So, Rin and Orchid, I understood that card on a fundamental level incorrectly in the weirdest way, and you're gonna laugh when I tell you what I thought it did.
Okay.
Because after I was playing with a buddy, and then he was like, "No, it does this," and I was like, "Holy crap, you're right! The right way, which is if you win on forest, due to a forest stat, you draw a card." For some reason in my head, don't ask me why, but I read that because there's a plant archetype in the game. I thought it meant like if you pushed the thing forward by using a plant character, because it's a little plant symbol, that you draw a card. And I was like, I'm so dumb. That's literally the icon that's for the forest stat. Why would I think it meant plant and why would they use an icon instead of just the keyword plant like they do with everything else in the game? And for some reason, my brain was just convinced that that meant a plant character.
That is one of the weirdest ways that I think you could have understood that. Just like this inherent, you saw the forest symbol and you were like, that's obviously the icon for the plant subtype of character.
I know, and it goes
What on
against
earth?
everything I've learned in card games in my entire life, but my brain was just so convinced that it was so confident when my brain told me that I was just like, yeah, that's what it is. I see no issue with that. Let's go.
You were like, yeah, if you're playing plants, you're obviously playing Rin and Orchid. That's the
Yeah.
um no, Rin and Orchid's actually much weirder than that, which is why I was really interested to just figure out just kind of like why people were exploring that so much. How about what are people playing in your area so far?
So one of our gentlemen is heavy Lyra. He's pumped about Lyra, and I like Lyra too. I'm very excited to make my alt win con deck with Lyra. I love that they have an alternative win con. I like those weird alt win con styles. There's a buddy of mine who has a Rin and Orchid deck and a Ysmir deck. He's going with the sacrifice build, bringing out the little worm boy Ma. Wants to
Yeah,
devour everything. There's another person who's playing Ashira, or a I already pronounced it wrong. Akesha.
Akisha. Yeah,
Yeah.
or Akesha. I don't know actually. It might. I don't know if it's a hard or a softy, but
They
yeah,
they picked it based on visuals, and then they didn't believe me when I told them that After You is literally like one of the best abilities in the game. Then they played the deck, and at the end, then they're like, "Oh my god, After You is such a good ability," and I was like, "Yep, it sure is."
yep,
There's a guy who's been bouncing between Axiom and Ortis. And then I've been playing mainly Bravos because the one box I opened had the Bravos cards that kind of work for what I wanted to build. I didn't quite get most of the Axiom cards I wanted to make my Brass Bug army deck yet, but I will soon. And that's kind of what's there. And then there was a handful of people that just don't have product yet because the game caught on enough to where the store sold out of all their Kickstarter starter
mm,
decks and their things. So now people are just patiently awaiting the full release to get their hands on the rest of the product. But
yeah, yeah,
the shop has a good thing where one of the shop guys actually bought like 3 or 4 of the starter decks, and he just sleeved them up for the shop to have as loaners. So when people came to the open play, they'll be like, "Oh, I want to try. I don't have anything." And just be like, "Well, here, take one of these starters, and you can play a couple games while you're here," which was really really great to have. And there was a handful of people that came in and got to just kind of play the starter decks while they wait for their product to either come in with the Kickstarter or come into the shop for them to get once full release happens.
that's awesome. That's good to hear. Our shop, our owner ordered a lot of product. I mean, I told him about it, and he was like, "All right, I'm in." So we haven't sold out of Kickstarter product quite yet. But we have product online for sale as well. So we're hitting not just our local community, but we're hitting up people who are trying to get product otherwise. And We're down to, let's see, I think in my online inventory, I have about 8 boxes left, something like 7 or 8 boxes available still. And the front has maybe a case or so. So we're getting down there compared to how much we had. And I wouldn't be shocked if by the retail coming in, the Kickstarter is gone. That seems pretty likely at this point.
Yeah,
So based on how things have been going. So yeah, that's cool. That's exciting. And it's great. It's great that it's finally here. I'm just like so pumped about it.
I know.
It
I'm
was
beyond excited.
I on Tuesday night I didn't play a single card, a single game. And I had just such a blast. I just walked around, I talked to people, I watched games. I helped people find matches because we are just doing open play stuff, and just got to like every time I saw like the little gold banner on the table, I was like a new unique, and I get to go read it and like, whoa, it's so good. Yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, so I was actually about to ask you a question about the formats that the format of like your tournaments and everything, and then I realized, Jordan, that's the topic of today's podcast. So why don't we talk about that in a little bit? Let me just do a little interlude here, and then let's move on to our main subject. Does that sound good?
That sounds like an incredible plan.
Perfect. So I'm just going to very briefly bother you all with our quick ad for ourselves, as usual, which is if you enjoy Fleeting Thoughts and all the other podcasts that we do. We produce a couple others here for other games. We sometimes put up a Patreon exclusive one, and should I tease? I'm not going to tease anything. I don't know. There's you never know what's going on with me. But if you enjoy all the stuff that we do, podcast related, you can always show us your support by leaving a little like on the video, comment down below. If you're listening on a podcast platform, you can give it the old 5-star rating, which helps other people find it and shows us that you really do appreciate it. Always appreciate all that stuff, and of course, share it with your friends. Let them know. That is super helpful. So thank you so much for all of the ways that you support us. And then if you play other TCGs than Altered that actually use TCG Player as a singles marketplace here in the US, and you like to buy your singles from the place where everybody sells their singles, it makes sense. Remember that you can always support Maindeck anytime you shop on TCG Player by using our affiliate link instead, which is to go to bit.ly/shoptcgs. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs. It does not work for Altered. It just doesn't. There's no Altered cards there, but it works for basically every other TCG under the sun. So thank you so much for thinking of us. Give us a little kickback. Help us out. Really appreciate all your support in all those ways. Now, Jordan,
Yes.
we have the launch. The launch is about to happen. If you are listening to this podcast when it goes up, then you may have Kickstarter product already, or you maybe have bought it from an LGS, or maybe you are waiting for the retail launch, which is like in a week or two. So here's the big question, Jordan. When I go to an LGS and I am looking to play some Altered, what can I expect? What, as far as what formats exist to play, what kind of prizes exist, what special events might people run? Like let's give the rundown was the idea here. Let's just talk about what are you going to expect going into an LGS to play Altered. Jordan, I'll let you just go ahead and take the reins.
All right. Well, first, we're just going to kind of go over the different formats you might see. For those that might be new to card games, if Alter is your first card game, welcome. Format is basically the set of rules that your tournament will be organized by. Generally, it'll have some form of deck construction rules. There's both limited and standard or structured or constructed, depending on the game you play. They use different words. I believe for this, they just call it standard constructed. Um, and that the standard construction is what we'll start with. That is going to be the basics of most official play on your weekly basis once the game is out. For the upcoming festivities of the game launch, we'll also go briefly touch on the rules of the two different limited formats, which is sealed and draft, and how they kind of differ in this game than they do in other games, because there is some funky rules tweaks and card additions that are specifically for limited play to kind of shore up the way you have to build your deck and the way things go. And there's also a for fun unofficial mode that you might see, and your store might have some fun events for, or you might just play with your friends, which is a officially unofficial multiplayer mode. And by that I mean there is an official rule set, but it's not finalized. They strictly said it's like for fun right now, and they're kind of refining it to become, the official multiplayer once it's done. But the preview rules are out there, and I it definitely sounds like a blast. So, reining it back, we'll start with the standard constructed events. Like I said, this will be the bread and butter of most places. Unless it gets really good, then you'll have sealed events all the time. But the way standard is going to work is you'll have for those more advanced players, you probably already know this shtick. But again, we kind of want to go over it because there might be some fresh blood in here. So we got standard is generally 1v1, as you'd expect. That's what the game is primarily designed for. And you will bring to the tournament a deck that you have constructed using the deck construction rules that should actually be found in the quick rules that come in your starter deck. It'll be a 39 card deck plus your character. All the cards in there will have to be from the same faction. This one I'm going to kind of breeze through because if you have read the rules, this will be very familiar to you. There's not really any big, crazy things here, but I will go over the structure will be either best of one or best of three. And this will be on your store's discretion. Some people prefer the best of one for time's sake. Some people like the best of three. Generally, more competitive people like that best of three. One reason people like best of three in most games is because there's a side deck that allows you to kind of swap cards in and out of your deck in a very limited capacity to kind of cater your deck to your opponent. That, however, is not a thing in this game. There is currently no sideboard. They do allude to the fact that they might add one in the future, but as of now, there will be no side deck. So the best of three, it'll be with the same deck all three games, but it still gives you a better set. A lot of times, people say they just like the best of three because they're here to play the card game and they want to get as many games in at a time. What are your thoughts on that, Dan? Are you a best of three man or are you a best of one kind of guy?
That's a great question for Altered because my answer is actually different than it has been in just about every TCG that I've played, seriously played so far. So I am a huge I'm a weird oddity in that I love competitive play. I love deep competitive play, like really grinding and trying to reach the upper echelons, the top levels of major tournaments. I love that. Um, Especially since I started main deck, um, my time and focus has been stretched a little thin to really be able to achieve solid results in that. So I do envy the people who are able to really put in the effort and get there. I usually end up personally falling a little short, but that doesn't reduce my drive and excitement for playing competitively. It just reduces my ability to output actual results at it. So my usual answer for this is best 2 out of 3 for everything all the time because I want that sort of consistency. That ability to play multiple games for things to average out, and to be able to use things like a sideboard to tweak my deck and study that the strategy related to that and everything. Um, that said, for altered, we have begun our locals by implementing. We're just doing best of one except in the case of higher level events. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, we're doing Tuesday night events. Okay. Like it just can't go that late. Like we got kids come. We literally have kids coming to this and it's on a school night and there's no way that they're going to be able to come to the event and get their homework done. And I mean, come on, you got to do your homework, kids. You got to do it. It's part of the deal. You just got to do it. So best of one allows us to actually crack the tournaments out a lot faster, which is good for the kids, good for the staff who has to, work at the shop. It's good for people who just want to be able to get home and do something with their family other than just play cards all day. I mean, we all want to do that, but um, so that, and then second, and this really resonated with people in our area when I was just talking to them about it, but Altered feels different than a lot of TCGs. Um, Altered is absolutely a game that can be played competitively and deeply. Um, but the general vibe of Altered is so almost not, it's not cooperative, but it's so just like it's so much friendlier, I feel, just on a base like game structure level than a lot of TCGs. Which is something that we've heard people remark on when they've learned the game for the first time. That was a very common compliment, I guess I should say, that I heard people saying every time I would teach them the game, like, I love how this isn't violent. I love how I feel like, we're just racing instead of really directly fighting each other. And in the spirit of that, the best of one, whatever happens, happens, kind of just like it's let's not get too in the weeds about it. That really felt like it was something that resonated with the players. And when I made that announcement, I felt like I got feedback that indicated I was right in guessing that. Seemed like everyone was actually pretty pumped. And believe me, it's weird to me to have a world where I say we're doing best of one, and everyone goes yes. Like that's not usual for me, but it really feels right for this. How about you, Jordan?
I'm kind of in the middle. The competitive side of me and the person who's hungry for games always wants the best of three. But having a game that has best of one, like you said, it's just more. It's more. I'm spacing on the word, but it caters better to everyone's timelines, especially. Our Alter Day is generally Mondays, as what we're basically going to be locking in. So, like you said, Mondays, it's a weekday. People get off work, people get out of school, they got to eat dinner. They don't necessarily have time to sit down and be at the card shop until 10, 11 at night. Now, some people do. Like our Star Wars Day was on Thursday, and a lot of people show up and we stay till 10, 10:30. But especially with Altered having a more kid friendly or family friendly environment that might actually rein, those types of players in, they're not going to want to have their Monday be taken up by work and then pick the kids up and then we're at a card shop until it's time for bed.
Yep.
Some people might, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people won't. And even if they do really love the card game, that's not necessarily all they want to do. So I'm just in the middle. And me personally, I like their method here because it's not one complaint I have about best of ones in some places. They still just do like a best of three style Swiss. So they'll be like 3 rounds, that's it, you're over. I like how Altered suggests that if you do a best of one, to do 4 or 5 rounds, because it's still ultimately going to be much less time than a best of three doing 3 rounds, because
Yep.
doing an hour long rounds, and most of the time people will still go to time, and it's about an hour and 15 most of the time per round. With the half-hour rounds, people finish one game and they're generally good to go within that half hour, and you're able to start the next round right away. So even if you're doing 4 or 5, you're still getting done far before the 3 round best of three, and you get to see more people. And I kind of get the feel that this one's going to be not necessarily like a more casual game, but there's a socialness to it, or it has a social feeling, I guess. And being able to interact with more people. Maybe it's just because now that I'm with the channel, I feel more obligation to socialize with my community too. Maybe that's part of it. But it's nice to get more opponents in the less amount of time than fight, 3 people for a longer amount of time.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah. And I
once
mean,
I was gonna say,
you're
once
just gonna. I,
competitive play starts up, I can always do my own personal training with people on non casual play days or non tournament days and just grind the games out when I need to.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I was just gonna say something that was actually totally useless, but now I've tried to talk so much that I have to go ahead and add it in anyway. So I was just gonna say that, like, regarding the amount of time it takes, even. I mean, I think your point about just the rounds going to time in best of three all the time and almost never going to time in best of one is likely usually the case. But um, just strictly speaking, best of three, you're looking at usually somewhere between, at the minimum, 6 games have to get played. Best of one, you can do 5 rounds before you even. If you do 5 rounds, you're still playing less games, right? Total than a 3 round best of three.
And there's one other key feature, and this of course will mean your community will have to be a certain size. But one thing that I thought is kind of neat is if you do best of ones, you can do more rounds efficiently, and you could maybe do something like a faction tournament, um, maybe like once a month doing best of ones, because you can more easily fit 6 rounds. So everyone fights, a different faction each time, and then you can, combine all the scores. But again, that requires you to have, a minimum number of players at your, disposal, because in order to have a faction style tournament, you'd probably need at least 2 to 3 players in each faction to even make it worth your while, or make the players have broken up into different teams. But it's still an option, at least with best of one. With best of threes, that's going to be an entire day long tournament that would be unfeasible
Yeah.
for most people to do. But with best of ones, you could have that just be like a once a month, like, oh, on a random Saturday we're going to have a 4 hour event where we do this fun faction tournament thing.
Yeah, honestly, like best of one is just such a godsend for being able to do any type of tournament. We'll talk about limited formats here in a minute, but those add a bunch of front-ended time too. And if you're trying to do things like draft or sealed deck tournaments on a weekday night, it's really difficult to have the building your deck portion and then minimum three to four rounds, depending on what your player base is. And then are you doing a top cut? Because then you have to do that afterwards too.
But yeah, so that will be the standard play. If you have anything else to add about standard, Dan, or should we move on to the juicy multiplayer rules before getting into the limited formats?
No, let's move on.
All right. So the multiplayer format, it's going to be kind of a quick blurb here, because the majority of the framework is going to be similar to standard construction, but it is a 4-player mode where you are on teams of 2. So it's a 2 versus 2 kind of scenario. They do have some things. I don't believe they have physical cards yet, but you have, these little sections, these little squares. For the viewers listening, I'm sorry, we'll link the article so you can see these pictures. And for the video, I'm assuming Dan will have pictures of it. But there's a little centerpiece. You'll be shuffling 2 copies of each of the tumult cards, the location cards. If you guys are unsure what the tumult cards are, you'll shuffle them up and you'll place them out, and you'll be placing all but 2 of them in an X pattern, with your companion on one side and the hero on the other, and then companion on the top and the hero on the bottom. And you will place the people in each quadrant of the X.
I want to correct you there. It's companions face each other, heroes face each other.
Oh, is it?
Yes. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. If you think through it, it wouldn't work at all. Because otherwise, you would have companion. One player would have 2 companions. Another player would have 2 heroes, and then 2 players would have companion hero.
Oh, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it's companion versus companion hero versus hero in the X. But
right, because
I don't want to interrupt your flow. So
yeah, that's right. Because you play in the quadrant. So the thing that I find most interesting about this, that gets me excited, is your teammate will be like kitty corner from you. So both the opposing teams are going to be on your left and across from you if you're sitting in the square pattern. And you'll be facing different people. So your hero side will be fighting, opponent A, and your companion side will be across from opponent B. So it's kind of like you're fighting a war on 2 fronts, but that's the same for everyone. So you got to coordinate with your team what to play where to help pressure different sides to kind of help your opponent, or not help your opponent, to help your ally on their battlefield if they're getting crushed. So they can pull, different things to put pressure on the opponent on this side. And it's going to create a very interesting push and pull. Another interesting note about it is, because you don't use all of the tumult cards, 2 of them won't be used and they are not revealed. You set them aside face down, and you don't know what they are until you've revealed everything, which means, depending on how you built your deck, maybe you might be stronger than your opponent in certain regards, or less strong if you have a bunch of water cards and, the primary water cards don't get placed. You're going to have to, roll with the punches and kind of see what happens. And since you're only seeing, it maybe also just be all water cards on all of them, because it's 2 separate decks of the tumult cards. So there's a non-zero chance there's water on everything for you, because it's in that X pattern. So,
yep. Yeah. And I don't think you mentioned this yet, but there's a special piece in the middle, a square piece instead of a card. So to put the cross together, there's a square in the middle that has 4 zones on it divided in an X. And when you move across, your character, your hero companion has to go into the first side of that, and then basically turns and moves down the other track until they can both meet.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's very interesting, and I'm very excited to play it for the first couple times. And of course, beyond that, but like the first couple times, I'm very interested to see how it plays out, especially when everyone's firing off on all cylinders. It should be pretty cool. I'm
Yeah.
very excited. And more importantly, I'm excited that they thought of it beforehand and are already fleshing out the rules to the point where it's playable by everyone. And based on how polished it seems, I'm assuming it's not too long before they just like lock it in as like this is the official multiplayer rules. I'm assuming, if I had to guess, I don't have any insider information. Maybe Dan does, but maybe the reason why it's still in process is because maybe they're trying to find a way to scale it up to more than 4 players. But they might also just be trying to refine it for just 4 players, because general like commander pods are 4 players, even though round table magic can be played with n number of people.
I don't have any insider information, but I do know that I had the opportunity to, but I chose not to play multiplayer in January of this year when I went up to Paris for the launch party. Um, so it has been sort of, in a functional state for quite a while. Um, and I think they've just been polishing things down, but I don't know. Maybe they have been working on stuff. They do say like there's been things they've been working on, like that centerpiece. Finding ways to get that to people. They say it's something that they'll have in a like a print on demand capacity. You'll be able to just get one printed for yourself, and they'll ship it to you just like all their other cards and stuff like that. So I'm sure that's like there's some logistical things like that they're working out. But yeah, I mean, I chose not to do it simply because there was a draft available also, and I really wanted to draft. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. But I wish I had time to play both because I haven't gotten to play this yet, and I really really want to.
Yep. And just a few interesting tidbits about it before we move on to limited. In regards to certain character abilities. So if something says target opponent, you can choose either opponent on your left or right side. If it says each opponent or your opponents, it means both of them. And this is where it gets juicy. If it says target character or target permanent, you can choose any of the 8 expedition zones. So it could be someone that you're not even on your side of the field. So, like, someone drops a character on your ally's side, you can still cast your ability or spell on that, regardless, as long as it says target character. So that's it's very juicy. I'm glad they did that instead of it just being, the stuff that's on your left and right board. You can cast it on the entire play field, which is really cool.
I want to mention about that because we were at our LGS this last week. We were talking about someone was playing a Golrang and Toxin deck, and we were talking about Open the Gates, the card that puts a bunch of Ortis recruits into expeditions, and they were specifically playing the rare version of it. And we were talking about it as they were playing it, and we all went, "Huh." Because it says create 4 Ortis recruit 1/1/1 soldier tokens distributed as you choose among any number of target expeditions. And we were like, that is really like, I don't see what, I mean, unless there's a rule somewhere that says tokens can only be created in expeditions you control or something. That's the only reason I think this wouldn't work. Otherwise, this just means you can go ahead and be like, "Hey, do you need a few 1/1s? I'm going to open the gates. I'm going to give them to my teammate across the corner from me, and help them out. Or I don't know, you can give it to your opponents if you want to. I guess you can give them a whole bunch of tokens. But yeah, it's effects like that that make multiplayer really fun.
Yep. And then the last little bit here, the way you win, both of you don't have to meet. It's just the first player to have their hero and companion meet up in the same region claims victory for the whole team. So
Yep.
sick team plays like that, you guys could just, leave one half to abandon and just go all in when you just have that little bit. If you just need to move up one space, you could just pool your resources and do as much as you can to get that one expedition to move forward.
But Jordan, the thing is, if you totally abandon one corner, then you're going to have an opponent who all they have to do is play a one drop on each
Hmm.
side, or maybe not even because they're playing Ortis, and then they can spend all their resources using their remove target character on your guys' stuff in the other one, and then someone's basically going like 2v1 outside of you having these effects. So
Or I'm gonna butcher the name. Or they play Equal Equilis, the Ortis card that just says you pick a different expedition, and the expedition, the one opposite, can't move forward. And then you all in on one side, and they're like, yeah, it's not moving forward for anyone, no matter what.
do you mean Isatok?
Maybe it's Isatok, the
Okay, I
big
think you
ball.
mean yeah, that's easy talk. So I was
Okay,
like, I do not know
I was
this
trying
card.
to
How do I
I was
not
trying
know
to
this
know
card?
its name right off the top of my head. I just remember it was
That's
some
all good.
I's, some L's, and it was a funny name.
Yeah, yeah, easy talk. Yeah, easy talk. True. Easy talk is good for holding them down. But yeah, lots of interesting. I hope we can at some point on the channel just explore some multiplayer aspects a little bit. At least just like maybe we might just make some videos that are like, here's some cards you should look at in multiplayer or something. But I got to play it first before I can just. I'm not just gonna talk out of my rear end about that.
Yeah, and there's also that sick ability to have cross faction compatibility that isn't normally there in the 1v1 because you don't have access. So being able to play cards on target character on your opponent or on
Mm.
your ally, you could do combo spell cards with characters that normally didn't have access to those spells. And given that the resource pool is across two different characters, you can do some sick plays like I'm going to play a gigantic character that costs all my mana. Normally, the turn I play Atlas, I can't boost him, but I can play Atlas, and then you could use All In from Lyra and just roll a die and give him 6 counters, and now I'm moving ahead twice unless they got a big removal.
Yeah, I think I'm just someone who, in general, has had a lot of fun in the past with team formats for card games, and I think a team constructed and I mean honestly, team draft are both things that would be extremely fun tournaments to play for Altered. And I mean, we're gonna look at potentially running a few like fun events like that, but either way, I'm hoping at the higher level events there will be some side side tournaments that we can get in on where they're going to do some fun team formats.
Yeah. But that is all the information that we have for you on the multiplayer format. And now we're going to move briskly into the limited formats. Now, we specifically wanted to cover these because these are going to be ones that are probably going to be there for your pre release or your release events. Sealed in particular is a good choice for most release events because draft does require some amount of card knowledge to, you can still have fun even if you don't know the card pool. And I know a lot of people that like drafting even when they don't know the cards, just because drafting is fun and has some neat interactions in it. And in this game specifically, there's some neat things you can do that are outside the normal deck construction rules. But sealed is something that is really good entry level for players. It doesn't require you to have any cards to start. So, someone who just learned about the game can just come in, they can easily play, and it's great for launch day because even if people have product, they don't necessarily have the time to open it and throw a deck together before the tournament. It allows everyone to just come in and play, and you can have a great time, and you get product at the same time. So we'll start off with the booster draft because I'm really excited, and I know Dan has played this a couple times already. Um, so for those of you who are unaware, a draft functions where you buy some amount of, or you get some amount of packs, and you'll open them one at a time. You take a card out of that pack, you pass it to the other players. Generally, it's done in pods of 8 or 6. I think even sometimes they do pods of 10, depending on the game. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
Altered recommends pods of 8 because the packs divvied out work a little better that way. So you'll take the one card and you'll pass it either to your left or right, depending on what round of drafting it is. The rounds are equal to the number of packs that everyone is given. So in the case that they recommend 4, there'd be 4 rounds of drafting. Then you'll take the contents of the pack that the person to your left or right has passed you. You'll look at them. You'll grab one of those cards and you'll continue this until all the cards have been drafted. Then you will make a deck with those cards. And you use that deck to play, and generally, in between rounds, you can swap cards out from the whole pool that you drafted. In addition to, you could just keep it the same too. But let's say there's a couple cards that you're like, I really want to play these. You can toss them in between rounds. But it's a very fun format. I highly encourage anyone who hasn't tried it to at least try it once. Um, it's got a lot of nuance in it. You can do all kinds of fun things. And the specific thing I want to talk about for Altered is its deck construction. Instead of having to have all of the same faction, you can choose up to 3 factions to put into your deck. And if you're like me, you're already excited at all the random combos that you can do that normally are impossible due to the restrictions of them being in different factions. In draft, it's a world where you can. There's also a rule in draft, and I believe in sealed as well, where you are not restricted as to how many copies of a card of the same name you can have in your deck. Same with rares, same with uniques. You can have, if you somehow pull only God packs around the table and everyone has all uniques, you could stuff them all in your deck, assuming there are 3 faction colors.
Which would be, I mean, it's pretty unlikely. But
Yeah,
if
very,
you're doing
very
a
unlikely.
if you're doing a Kickstarter edition sealed deck tournament and you open a golden booster, you are going to have a great event. It is going to go really, really well for you. If you open that golden booster in a Kickstarter edition draft, you might want to discuss with your tournament organizer your
Mhm.
options.
That's what I was
You
gonna say, because a lot of stores, if like in other games that have God packs, as they're called, um, most stores will have some sort of like rule about it to where if you do get one in a draft, you can choose to just pay the money for a different booster pack and just say you bought the golden booster and use the new booster pack as your draft pack. Because yeah, if they don't do a rule like that, it feels really bad because you're like excited at first because you're like, oh, I got the super mega rare thing, and then you're like, I have to literally give most of this away to not me. This feels bad.
we're setting up an in-house league for Altered, like we do for some of our other TCGs, and the ultimate prize at the end is there are going to be 6 people who are going to be invited to a 6-person Kickstarter edition booster draft. We're holding back a box to be able to do this like right before the release of set 2. Um, and yes, in writing, there is the rule that I'm not even going to make him pay for it. Actually, there's a rule that if you pull a golden booster, congratulations, just keep it. And here's a new booster. And if that booster is also a golden booster, because it's
Go
from a
buy a
different
lottery ticket.
box, then you have to draft it. Sorry, and the draft is going to be messed up at that point because there's fewer, because there's a bunch of unique foilers in there instead of
Hmm.
cards. So, but it's just like whatever. Fine, you all get uniques. Have fun. Like your draft is a little scuffed, but who cares? At that point, one person just opened a million uniques, and then you all drafted several. Also,
Yeah. But aside from that, the actual playing of the game is pretty similar. But there is one other unique note that is also shared with Sealed. You need to make at least a 30 card deck. Let's say you're drafting and you just spread yourself too thin. You weren't sure which factions you wanted to go into, and you literally just don't have 30 cards to make your minimum deck size. In Altered, they have what's called a mana convergence token that I believe it even says it on there that it's not normally used for constructed play. It's just there for limited play. So what you will do is you will make whatever you can out of your deck, and then you will put the remaining as mana convergence tokens. And mana convergence tokens cannot be played in the normal way. They can't go into your reserve, your expedition, or your landmark area. They can, however, be used to discard effects. So if you have something that says discard X to do this, or your opponent must discard a card, you can still choose those, but you can put them in mana is their primary use. So it's not as good as having an actual card, but it's better than not being able to play. And I'm glad they did that because then it adds some flexibility to your deck construction. If you really wanted to play a certain 3 colors and was just missing, 2 or 3 cards from being able to play that deck, you can now just be like, cool, I'll just run 2 or 3 mana convergence cards. I don't recommend having a majority of your deck be that, but if you want to do it, more power to you. If you have some crazy build, then maybe you go off king or queen.
Yeah, if you have to use mana convergence tokens, your deck isn't in a great spot. Um, I think I don't know if we ever even saw people having to use them in the drafts. I mean, obviously, it wasn't at every draft that happened at Gen Con, but the ones I was in, I think everyone was good to go. I was providing a few tips to some new drafters, and maybe that helped, avoid the need or something. But it's pretty uncommon that you have to do that. This isn't like a feature. The big feature of the draft is those three factions gives you so many options that it's really tough to run into the need for these, but they're there like just in case.
Yep. And another thing to note about both these limited formats, you're not required to have a character card. So
Yeah.
if you want to play with one, you should draft it early. Don't expect it to be like, oh, it's the character card. It'll make it back to me. Because it probably won't. And then you'll have to play without a character card, which is a feature of limited play. You can technically play without a character card. So keep that in mind because sometimes maybe people will get lost in the sauce and they'll really want certain three colors. And then they forgot to draft a character and they're like, oh, well, now I have to pick a different color. My card pool isn't good. If your card pool is still strong, you technically can still just play without a hero. But again, having a free ability on board that's mostly used every turn, probably not the best idea unless you just have the most cracked set of cards in the deck that you're just confident about it.
You still could have any hero. And like the thing about the hero too is if you don't have a hero, it's not only that you're losing access to the abilities, it's that you also have to now play a 30 card deck instead of a 29 card deck. And
True.
well, 30 is the minimum. One piece of advice. I'm gonna give a couple of pieces of advice to new drafters and sealed deck players for that matter. While 30 is the minimum, you should do your best to consider 30 the maximum as well, 29 the maximum with a hero card. Um, the big thing to keep in mind is that, like, at the end of the day, in every card game, at the end of the day, some cards are better than others. And now I've been corrected in some rare TCGs where it's actually considered not as bad to go over the minimum number of cards. But I believe Altered is in the more standard TCG realm where you want to draw your good cards and not your less good cards, even if they're only very slightly less good or something. Um, I would recommend trying to stick to that minimum number of cards as much as possible.
Very much so.
And then I'm going to give one more piece of advice too. It's this is related to draft, related to all this stuff, um, related to helping you actually get the right number of cards and everything. So you have three factions that you're drafting, right? You're going to be drafting 4 booster packs, and across those 4 packs, you have to end up with honing down everything you pick into 3 factions. I think it's very tempting for new drafters to, on the outset, kind of have either in their mind, even before they open the first pack, they might have a few factions they want to see. If they're new players, especially, like I've played a lot of Bravos, I definitely want to draft Bravos, and that would work really well with Muna, and that would work really well with Lyra. So I want to go for those. Um, it also can be the case that you open your first pack and you just start taking cards that look good, and you take a Muna card, and then you take a Bravos card, and then you take a Lyra card, and you got your Atlas, and you got your meditation training, and you got your all in because that goes with both of those cards really well. And you're like, oh, cool, I have a deck. I would advise in as many scenarios as possible, do not like lock yourself into 3 factions in pack 1. Just try not to do that. Um, a big skill that you develop drafting is called reading signals, which is you're looking at the cards you get passed, and you're not just thinking which card is best for me here, but you're also looking at the pack and going, boy, this is suspiciously low on Ortis cards. Um, and then you see another pack from that direction, and you go, this is also suspiciously low on Ortis cards, but there's a really good Muna card here and a really good Izmir card here. And you do that after a number of packs that you're past, and you start making those judgments. You can start to go, yeah, okay, so there's definitely someone to my right who's drafting Ortis. And there's also across the people to my right, none of them took the cards that I think are really good in Izmir and Muna. So actually, those look like they might be more available to pick if I start taking those. Now, maybe the people to your left are taking them. So pack two, which comes from the other direction, maybe that you won't get as many cards for that faction for those factions. But then pack three, which is back coming from the right again because you're passing left, that is gonna then now you're gonna get past like all the good stuff if you read the signals right, because now you decided now you go into Muna because nobody's taking Muna to your right, and now they're passing you everything. You're getting rare Hydrocana, you're getting rare Nurture. Oh, that could be so good. They're just passing you all these good things, and that is so the important skill to keep in mind is like if you start out your pack, grab some good cards, try to stick to two factions in your first pack that are working really nicely together and leave yourself open. It's okay to pick stuff that doesn't end up getting in your deck, right? It's okay to I can't tell you how many times I've done this across different card games. My very first pick never ends up in my deck. I open the pack, I'm like, this rare is sick. Yeah, and then I just play a completely different deck. It just because I started reading the signals, I'm like, yeah, too bad. Like these guys are hard cutting Ortis, so there's no way I'm gonna end up playing this thing. I'm just gonna play something that has more good cards that I can play than just that one card. Um, so yeah, don't lock yourself into anything, but try to hone in on two factions, and then you have this third faction available. And try to read the signals of the draft. Try to figure out what's open, and that'll give you a lot of room to kind of flex your deck in the right direction, and leave you with plenty of cards to choose from by the end of the draft too. Um, so that yeah, that was getting more in the weeds than I thought because we really would have. I think we really should at some point after Jordan, after you and especially you get some drafts in. I think we should do an episode that's just draft talk. Right? I think that would be a really good episode of the podcast. But this one is actually I think, Jordan, we were planning on talking a little bit more about things like the adventure pass and the prizes and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But I think what we might want to do, Jordan, is just kind of culminate in what kind of launch events people are going to potentially see here and some of the prizing that they might start to see. But let's save the discussion for the adventure pass and everything for a future episode. How does that sound?
That works. I was thinking the same thing. Partially also because I thought I want to experience it a little bit too to kind of get the feel,
Yeah.
see how it looks, see how the app works, things like that as well. Because they did release some general info, but we could always save it for a later time.
Yeah. Well, with
Which,
that in-depth discussion on limited, then what exactly is the recommended launch tournament that people are expecting to see, and what can people expect when they go to it?
yep. So there's going to be two types. One is will be a sealed deck tournament, and the other one that they've specifically called out and recommended as a launch event, especially since the game is completely fresh, is a starter deck tournament. Given we're currently talking about limited events, we're going to go over sealed first, and then we'll kind of touch on the starter deck tournament because there's not a whole lot to it. Based on the name, you probably are going to guess exactly what kind of rule set it is, so we don't need to talk about it too much. In that vein, actually, since we don't have a lot to talk about it, we'll just talk about it now. In the starter deck format, which is the one of the two ones that they recommend, it will be a starter deck, and you get 3 booster packs to go along with it. You crack open the packs, and you combine your starter deck cards and your 3 packs into a deck in the same manner that you would construct it with draft, except you don't have to draft the cards. And then you play the tournament using that deck. Um, it's a pretty regular. You have a good baseline with the
There it
starter
is.
deck. So there's not. I mean, the starter deck kind of helps govern what you have. The difference between draft and sealed and starter deck tournaments, however, is you don't get 3 factions. You do still have to stick to the one faction. With starter deck tournament, it's a little easier because, like I said, you basically out of the box already have a fully fledged, ready to go deck. The sealed, however, has a little more nuance to it. So the way sealed will work is instead of 4 packs like a draft, you will get 7 packs that you will have to open and assess what kind of deck you want to make using only the cards from those boosters. They're like draft, they will be 30 card decks, and then after deck construction, you'll play the tournament. They do have some same guidelines similar to draft, such as cards with the same name. There's no restriction. If you somehow pull 6 seasoned warriors as Bravos, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah,
um,
you are.
because that's a good card. So that's a lot of the similarities. There's, I guess, not really a ton to talk through, but there is a lot of strategy in your deck construction here. Assessing what cards you have that can really bring power to your deck. You want to generally, I forgot what the fun acronym they used to have in Magic and other games, where you should kind of like prioritize certain cards. You're going to want some good board presence. You're going to want some early plays as well as some mid and late plays. You're going to want so think of like the cost of things is what I mean by early and mid and late plays. You're going to want to make sure you have a good amount of stuff you can play turn one, turn two, turn three, based on how much mana you might have. You're going to definitely want to look at some removal if the faction you have has some. And I think each faction in this game at least has some type of removal. Maybe it's not hard removal, but at least get stuff off the board. Removal is very good because, especially in a sealed event, if your opponent drops some big game ending character on the turn, you don't need them, you really can't fight them on it. Having something to just tell them no and pick it back up, very potent and powerful and sealed.
Yeah, the acronym for Magic was bread, but I'm not even going to go through it because it's, I think, so different and altered
Oh
that
yeah,
there's not even
100%.
a point.
Yeah, that's why I just
I
went
just
over the
want to,
finer points, which was you want to have,
yeah,
a good spread of characters and then stuff to remove at least somewhat. But you were saying?
I think I wanted to reiterate the low cost thing in particular. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people making in early deck building is not valuing those low cost 1, 2, 3 cost units enough. Um, so I recommend to make sure. I wish I had a good numbers, but I think when we do our draft podcast, we'll have like some better deck construction guidelines that you can use apply to sealed as well. But um, just don't skimp on your 1, 2, and 3 drops. Put some in. Even I know Studious Disciple isn't as cool as uh Katagir and Alchemist or something, right? But like what those do is really we have a whole
Yeah.
podcast episode on 1 and 2 drops and why they're awesome. So go back and listen to that old episode because we talk about why they're so good, and you want to have them because you want to have lots of flexibility, and not only in your early game but in your late game too. And they do it all. They're workhorses in Altered. So
Yep, your one and two
that's my
drops
biggest piece of advice.
will be the bread and butter, the cornerstone or backbone of your deck in this game particularly. Even if you
Yeah.
come from other games, they are very relevant and very potent and powerful through the entirety of the game, and sometimes they are more powerful in the late game because having the ability to after you essentially your opponent for 1 mana and still giving a getting a free body that maybe will do something is huge. Forcing your opponent to have to play out their plan before you commit to any one strategy for the turn is it's one of those things that you also just kind of have to experience because there's been a couple people. The ability after you, for those who are unaware, it's an ability keyword that literally just says you pass your action and your opponent has to go again. The first time people see that on one of the characters, they see that and they're like, "Oh, that's so bad. Like, why would you ever want to go second? Or like, why would you
Yeah.
want to not play?" And then once they play the game with it, they're like, "Oh my god, this is like the best ability in the game." So having the flexibility to do that late game and get a free body is so worth it. The second you are in a pinch and you're like, man, I wish I knew. A good thing to think of is anytime you're playing this game and you think in your head, man, I wish I knew what my opponent was going to do. Think to this discussion and the discussion we had on 1 and 2 drops and be like, if you had a 1 drop, you could force your opponent to tell you what they're going to do before you do your big play.
I'm going to just extend this discussion slightly with the first and maybe last edition of Dan's Izmir tips, because Dan doesn't play a ton of Izmir, but maybe I'll eat my words. Maybe this will be a recurring segment. But here's Dan's Izmir tip number 1. So everyone likes to play Akesha and Taru, and do the thing where they go, okay, I'm the starting player. All right, after you, you start. Haha, right? Which is good a lot of the time. Um, but especially when you get into the later stages of the game, do you know what is actively massively better in a lot of scenarios? Is to go, okay, I'm the starting player. I'll play a one drop. And
Hmm.
then the opponent has to take their action. And then it becomes your turn. And then you go, all right, after you. Now I'm going to have you take two actions in a row before I meaningfully spent anything here. If you have an Alice in your reserve also, you effectively force the opponent to play their entire turn out because very frequently, even in the late game, turn players a whole round players don't do more than three actions on a turn. It's pretty rare to do more than three card plays. So there are many scenarios where, well, there's many scenarios where even just the single one drop in the after you is making your opponent play their entire turn before you've done anything meaningful. But then if you also have the Allison, it's like, yeah, it's basically a lock. It's like the late game, it can be entirely decided because you make your opponent do everything. And then you go, all right, now I'll respond to whatever you're doing and get rid of that and play this over here. And then um, yeah, that is Dan's Izmir tip. Don't be so quick to just pass the turn with the Keisha when you can instead play a little one drop, a little studious disciple. Again, he's pretty sweet actually, and make your opponent have a really bad time, which is the hallmark of Izmir. It's what we love to do.
Yeah, and just to reiterate on that point, keep in mind in this game, unless you have after you, when you pass, you are done playing cards, which
Yeah.
means each time it's your turn, you have to play something or you forfeit the turn. And the reason why it's so powerful is because it's also a low key, a way to counter any removal your opponent might have. If you force them to spend all their mana before you play
Mm-hmm.
your big dude, or you force them to have to pass because they have no targets for their spells, it doesn't matter if they have all untapped mana and a handful of spells. If they have to pass because there's no targets, you now just get to play that for free, and they literally can't do anything about it.
Yeah, do you want you if you want, you can paint prison my studious disciple. That's fine. Go for it. Would you like to do that or would you like to pass?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it can feel really really gross. So, that's just one of many reasons that 1 and 2 drops are super powerful. So, my biggest advice is do not underestimate them when you're building your limited decks.
Yep. And then a couple extra tidbits about the sealed that I wanted to mention. I think I kind of mentioned it in the draft, but just like with draft, mana convergent cards are at your disposal. So if you have, one or two cards short of the deck you want to play in sealed, you just shore it up with your mana convergence. You want to try not to do that because, like we said, any card can be a mana or a discard. So you probably want something that can at least be played if you need to, rather than a mana convergence. But sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. And of course, you don't have to play with a character, but you really should play with a character. I would
Yeah,
rather play
highly
a deck
recommended.
that had, like, let's say for some reason I only pulled characters from one faction and I had a killer deck in Bravos, but I have a character card in Lyra, but I need 5 mana convergences to play Lyra. I would still go with the Lyra with 5 mana convergences than a more complete deck in Bravos, because having that extra ability and flexibility to do stuff on my turn is going to swing more turns than having better cards in my deck that are probably half of them going to mana anyway.
You have to ultimately mana orb some cards. So yeah, don't I mean play a hero. Play a hero if you can. I don't want to see any of you not playing a hero in limited because that's just unless you're doing it for fun. You're like you're gonna try to flex on people. I'm gonna see if I can beat you without a hero. Then all right, go for it. Make sure you put a 30th card in your deck though, or you're cheating.
Yes. But
All right.
so
So
that
last thing,
is, yes.
prizes. What I just want to we don't have to go into detail in this one. We'll talk about that later. But the big thing to mention is that at launch weekend,
Hmm.
the store should have promo boosters and the adventure pass should be available. So we'll talk about the adventure pass entirely, and I think in a different one, basically you're just going to pick a faction and then you're going to earn points for playing, and then you're going to get free alt arts. That's all you need to know for now.
And the alt arts look sick.
They do. They do. But the thing that's exciting, I think, is the promo packs. So, again, I don't think we need to go through the entire breakdown of things, but the basic gist of the promo pack is that it's a 3-card booster. And those 3 cards are a foiler of some kind,
Mhm.
a token, which with exclusive art.
Alternative art, yeah, it
Yep,
looks.
yep. Alternate art token, and an either unique or exclusive promo.
Yep. So the promos that you guys may or may not have gotten during the road shows, you'll notice that the last year at Gen Con and some other previous events, you were able to get, one set of heroes, and then the road shows had a different set of heroes. The promo packs are going to have the third and final set of heroes as potential. I don't know if they come foil, but they are the
No,
textless promos. So it's just the glorious art in all its glory, which
these are
are
the
which are legal to play in all formats. I'll mention that because they mention it in detail as in the FAQ on their different formats. The text list cards are all usable as long as the QR code is still functional on the card. Basically, it's just there so if someone doesn't know what it does, they can scan the card during the gameplay and
right,
see the card rules.
right. Makes sense. I want to mention that the promos that you can get, the promo set of characters, were the ones they were giving out at Gen Con. So that's great because it's going to make them more available to everybody within these promo packs. But in particular, I just think it's so cool that 40% of the time in these, you're going to get a unique.
Yeah,
Um,
having the when I saw the unique pull rate, that's one of the things that excited me the most. So, um, a lot of people are disappointed, or not a lot of people. I could see people being disappointed that the unique rate in the non Kickstarter boxes are fairly low for what they are. And if you don't have the money to drop, buy multiple boxes, you may go a long time without seeing unique. The fact that you're going to get a promo card just for showing up that has a 40% chance of getting unique means everyone has great chances to pull their exciting, sick card that everyone at the table, regardless of who they are, is going to be like, what does that do? I want to know what that does too. Like, what did you pull? It's going to be very exciting all the time. And I love it.
Yep. I'm really happy with how these promo boosters worked out. So when you go to your launch event, as long as they got the kit appropriately, which I think is just being shipped out with their stuff, that you should be able to get a promo booster for playing, potentially more payouts based on the shop, have some fun, enjoy Altered, crack into some packs, have a good time. And then beyond that, it's time to adventure. It's time to earn some alt arts. And it's time to just explore this exciting new TCG, which is finally here. We finally have it.
For sure. So we forgot to do it last time, but we did not forget this time. So before we close out for the day, we have some viewer questions or
We have
question.
a mailbag question. Yeah, mailbag question of the week. So, as a reminder, you can always leave a mailbag question for us and we will discuss it on a future episode. All you have to do is drop down in the comments on YouTube and you can do hashtag mailbag and then leave your question. You can also email if you want to do it that way. You're welcome to email maindeckgames@gmail.com and just put fleeting thoughts mailbag in the subject and leave it there. That works too. If you want to do a little privacy with your question, you can do that. The question we have this week is from our good friend and fellow Musubi, Gavken. Gavken asked, wait a sec, I was looking at the wrong one. I was looking at it, he was making fun of me in a different one. Gavken asks, what is your favorite unique that you've either seen or opened? Please show it if you can. So Jordan and I talked a little bit before the episode about what we were going to show. Jordan, let's start with yours. We each have one unique that we want to show off. Jordan, tell us about this unique. I'm going to pop it on the screen for everyone on the visual, but you got to read it out for everyone on the audio here.
Is it the Ysmir one or the Bravos one? Because there was two that I was thinking.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Izmir one. Well, okay, which
The
one are you
easier
talking
one
about?
is dope. I'll do that one. I wasn't sure if you wanted to
Okay.
present that one. All right, so the Ysmir one, we have an Alice that's 4 cost, 4 reserve. It is a 2/3/3 stat line, and it has a textbook of abilities, starting with when played from anywhere, you may discard a card from your reserve. If you do, you may return target character or permanent with hand cost 4 or less to its owner's hand, which is pretty potent. But it also has, when played from hand, you may return target character or permanent with hand cost 4 or less to its owner's hand, which is insane. It also has, not done yet, the classic Alice ability, which is while in reserve, you can discard it to after you. And the reason why this card is so insane is on 4 drop, you get a pretty decent statted body. You can choose to bounce 2 of your opponent's things, or you can bounce one of your opponent's things and then bounce the Alice, so you can keep reusing her ability to bounce things over and over again if you really want to. It's flexible and it's so potent. It's insane.
It hits characters or permanents. It only hits hand cost 4 or less, but that's 4 or less is a pretty hefty number. Um, but the fact that it hits characters or permanents means it can be like a blowout card against Axiom sometimes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you also can do this thing because one of those abilities is a when played from anywhere. The other one played from hand. So you can play it from hand, do both, bounce stuff away, easy victory on one side of the board. It goes to reserve. Next turn, you can play it from reserve and just pitch another card in reserve to return it to your hand if you want to. Maybe you're already losing that turn. You have the extra mana and you're like, well, you know what? I'm not going to lose next turn. I'm going to replay my Alice and just send her right back to my hand. And then next turn, I'll play her again and bounce 2 more things or something. Um, I mean, there's definitely some interesting and exciting potential for this. Now, you don't, unfortunately, Jordan. This isn't one of your uniques, right? This isn't one you own.
No, this sadly is not. It's one of my good friends has some friends from where he used to live, and they pulled this and sent him a picture and was just like blasting about it, and it was like, yeah, that is an insane card.
Yeah, I've seen open some pretty insane cards. This is definitely I think higher on the list just because of its raw potential for impacting the board you turn it play you the turn you play it. It's for just 4. It like 4 mana feels like a really good deal for a 2/3/3 with those abilities. It's pretty wild.
So, Dan,
Um
what is your card? I'm very
yeah,
excited for this.
the card I'm going to share is it's very exciting because it is in fact my only owned unique as we're recording this video. As we're posting this video, I hope it's not my only owned unique. That would be a pretty bad experience if I pull no other uniques than this. But I pulled this unique because on the day of our roadshow, when our product all arrived, everybody was cracking boxes, and I was so jealous. But I was like, I want to leave the product for everybody else because I'm getting plenty. But then I thought, I have to open. I just have to open a couple. I'm an addict. I'm hopeless. I opened 3 packs, and I opened the first 2 packs. And like, no unique, no unique. Third pack, I saw the gold banner, and I was like, all right, we got one. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to get one unique, no matter what it is. I saw the Muna symbol, and I was like, we are in there. So I opened this. Here it is on the visual. This is Capelia. Capelia Muna, so the out of faction version of Capelia, 3 hand cost, 3 reserve cost, 1/3/0. But when I read this effect, I had to reread this multiple times. And I was like, what is going on here? This card is actually like surprisingly complicated and extremely potent for what it does. So it's a 1/3/0 for 3. Has characters you control other than me have tough 2. Okay. So she doesn't have tough 2. It's probably the biggest and maybe only drawback of this card, but she gives all your other characters tough 2 while she's on the field. Now, Capelia always does something about going to reserve and coming back asleep, but the zone is sometimes different. In this case, this Capelia says, when I go to reserve from the expedition zone, you may play me for free and I gain a sleep. And I had to like parse through this a couple times before I figured out, okay, so here's what this card is doing. This is a 3 cost, 3 mountain. The 1 forest is occasionally going to matter, but really you are getting 3 in a stat for 3, which is relevant. So the turn you play it, you get that, and you get tough 2 to your board, which is cool. Maybe the only thing you play. It depends. Then at the end of that turn, it's going to go to the expedition zone and immediately replay herself asleep. So then the following turn, as she plays herself from expedition, so she's going to get fleeting as well. So she'll be out, she'll be asleep and have fleeting. And then that turn, she won't have the stats, but she still is giving tough 2 to your entire board, which then you're free to play anything. Play your daughters, play whatever, and your cone man. They all have tough 2. They're all going to be hard to interact with. Then she's going to lose a sleep and stay out for a third turn. But on that third turn, now her stats are active again. And she's going to still be giving tough 2 to everything, but now be providing that 3 mountain again. And at that point, Jordan, you're in Muna. Like, anchor her.
Yeah.
Why not? Just you could I love Arjun and Spike already. They're one of my favorite heroes. So as soon as I opened this, I was like, yes. Like, this goes right into Arjun and Spike. The hand cost is perfect. I can freely I could anchor her the turn I play her instead. So I anchor her that first turn, and then she goes to reserve and comes to sleep the second turn, and then for the third turn she's asleep. Then for the fourth turn she's not asleep. Whatever. Like, it's the Copelia shenanigans here are completely wild. Tough 2 on everything is going to just frustrate so many people when Muna's big way to deal with them is obviously interacting with their board. So I was really, really jazzed about this Copelia. It looks like a ton of fun. And even if it ends up, maybe we'll look at a million more uniques and I'll be like, this one's just all right or whatever. I don't feel like that's the case, but if that is the case, it still is my Copelia, right? And she's still good no matter what. Even if she's not insane, there's no way in no world you can tell me that this unique isn't at least good.
Yeah, it seems like very, very good. And like you said, having the tough 2 and having it in Muna makes it even more like vicious, because Muna stuff is sometimes already a pain to get off the board or remove. Now everything is going to be expensive to remove. Ugh. And then you're going to do some Muna shenanigans, and then it'll still be there anyway. And then you're like, well,
Yep.
Spent a turn trying to remove something and failed.
I think with this card's built in, like a sleep replay and everything, I think it is not unreasonable at all to have games where Copelia is out the entire game. If the opponent has no way to deal with it, the Copelia will just always be there. And also, if their method of removal is sending it to reserve, that actually just triggers the asleep the first time anyway. So it doesn't even get rid of it for the turn. It does shave a turn off of its length.
It's timer.
It's timer, yeah. But I'm super happy. I love my unique. And that's what I love about Altered. I love that we get that way about things. So it's super fun. Well, this has been Jordan, we did it again. We sat down and recorded like this will be a fast one. Yeah, we just get too excited about Altered.
I know. Altered is just so good. There's so many, like, we could discuss like everything about it for so long. But yeah, do you got any closing remarks before we close this one out?
No, just that I can't believe we had another half of the podcast to do. That will be another probably oversized podcast in the future. That's all I got. But I hope everyone enjoyed it as always. But you go ahead and give us the old lead out, and we'll see everyone in the next one.
All right. Well, as you guys know, that was our fleeting thoughts. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We look forward to talking with you guys in about 2 weeks. Have a great day. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.